Take a look at a satellite image of southern India and the island of Sri Lanka. Something immediately jumps out: a faint, broken line in the sea. A nearly invisible trail of land, almost like the planet itself, tried to build a bridge between the two nations, but didn't quite finish the job. This isn't just a random formation. That trail stretches nearly 48 kilometers across the ocean, and for anyone who's looked closer, it's hard not to wonder, why hasn't anyone completed the bridge? It's shallow out there, incredibly shallow. In fact, in many areas, the water barely covers a meter in depth, and in others, it doesn't exceed 10 meters. Not only is it visible from above, but parts of it were actually walkable not too long ago. Imagine that, walking across the sea from India to Sri Lanka. It's the kind of mystery that feels ancient, even mythic. Yet despite today's technology, modern engineering feats, and decades of proposals, there's still no physical bridge linking the two lands. So, what's holding it back? Let's rewind the tape. This formation has fascinated humanity for thousands of years. It's known by different names depending on who's telling the story. Some call it Adam's Bridge, others refer to it as Rama Setu, and still others know it as Setu Bandhai. But no matter what name it goes by, its presence is undeniable. A natural land chain connecting Pamban Island on India's southeastern tip to Mannar Island in northwestern Sri Lanka. Geologically speaking, this isn't some random pile of rocks. During the last glacial period, think about 115,000 to 11,700 years ago, the Earth's climate was much cooler, and sea levels were dramatically lower, up to 120 meters below where they are now. At that time, what's now called the Palk Strait likely looked very different. Instead of an oceanic divide, it probably formed a land corridor between the two regions. As the glaciers melted and seas rose again around 11,000 years ago, the corridor submerged, leaving only a broken chain of sandbanks, limestone shoals, and coral formations behind. Now, depending on which cultural lens you look through, this land bridge carries deep spiritual weight. In Hindu tradition, the Ramayana epic speaks of Lord Rama building a bridge with his monkey army to cross over to Lanka and rescue his wife, Sita, from the demon king Ravana. That very bridge, called Rama Setu, is believed by many to be this ancient formation. On the other hand, certain Muslim traditions hold that Adam's Bridge is the path that Adam walked after being cast from paradise, making his way from Adam's Peak in Sri Lanka to the Indian mainland. Even Persian navigators referred to it as the Bridge of the Sea. Whatever the mythology, the sentiment is the same. This formation is no ordinary strip of earth and sand. Science also finds it compelling. The Geological Survey of India dated some of the coral formations in this region, particularly those near Rameswaram Island, to around 125,000 years ago. But other studies suggest parts of the visible structure might be far younger. There are two prevailing theories about how it came to be. One points to natural sedimentation, with sand and silt slowly building up over time to form barrier islands. The other suggests it might represent an ancient shoreline, a remnant of the time when India and Sri Lanka were once directly connected before tectonic movements set them drifting apart. And here's what makes this even more intriguing. Temple records and ancient texts hint that this land bridge wasn't always submerged. In fact, many believe that until the late 15th century, it was completely above sea level. That is, until a massive storm in 1480 reportedly swept through and destroyed large parts of it, pushing sections underwater. Up until then, it's said people could literally walk across from India to Sri Lanka during specific seasons. It's no wonder trade between the two regions dates back millennia. Small boats and local vessels navigated through the shallows, and people exchanged goods, stories, and culture long before modern borders came into play. Imagine traveling by foot across the ocean, carrying spices, silks, and scriptures. Pilgrims made the journey not by ship, but by land. Barefoot, determined, and guided by starlight. Some families had ancestors who claimed to have made the crossing multiple times, treating it as a seasonal rite of passage. Elders spoke of witnessing herds of cattle being taken across during dry spells. Folktales passed down in coastal villages describe a time when merchants from Jaffna and Madurai would meet halfway, shaking hands above the sea. Local fishermen believed the bridge was protected by divine forces and would often offer coconuts and prayers before setting sail. Even sailors from distant ports would navigate by the line of the bridge, using it as a natural compass. Travelers wrote about hearing the crunch of coral beneath their sandals. During low tide, the entire stretch would shimmer under the sun like a path carved by the gods. It wasn't just a link between two lands, it was a living corridor of exchange. There were festivals held to celebrate successful crossings. Dancers and drummers would wait at the edge of the landmass to greet those arriving on foot. It's said the air carried a scent of both cinnamon and sea salt. Children played along its length, chasing crabs and building dreams out of wet sand. In many ways, it was less of a barrier and more of a bridge, one crafted not just by nature, but by the footsteps of generations. But the shallow waters that supported these age-old exchanges posed a big problem for larger modern ships. Vessels from the west had to take the long route, circling around Sri Lanka to reach India's eastern coast. This added days, even weeks, to voyages and increased the cost of trade. The obvious solution? Build a passage, or better yet, a full-fledged bridge. This isn't a new idea. Way back in the late 1700s, a British geographer named James Rennell suggested dredging a navigable passage through the strait. But as a young officer without much clout, his proposal didn't gain traction. It took another 60 years before anyone looked at it seriously. In 1823, Sir Arthur Cotton was assigned to survey the region, and his work laid the foundation for future efforts to connect the two nations. By the mid-19th century, dredging began, early efforts, slow and scattered, trying to chip away at nature's centuries-old structure. In 1860, a British naval officer proposed a canal to cut through the region, but that plan was scrapped too. The costs were high, and the risk from monsoon storms made it nearly impossible to guarantee safety and sustainability. Even in the golden age of British colonial engineering, with all their ambitious railway and canal projects, this one seemed just too complex. It wasn't just about the weather or the shallows. The Palk Strait posed a unique challenge. Its constantly shifting sands, unpredictable currents, coral beds, and fragile marine ecosystems made construction a nightmare. The idea of connecting India and Sri Lanka remained a dream for over a century. Fast forward to the 21st century, and the concept of a bridge came roaring back. In 2002, during a period of peace talks in Sri Lanka, then Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe revived the proposal. He didn't just want a bridge, he called for a Hanuman bridge, paying homage to the Ramayana legend. He pitched it as a flagship project under his government's reawakening plan, and talks began with India's Prime Minister at the time, Atal Bihari Vajpayee. A preliminary agreement was reached, and optimism surged. This time, it wasn't going to be just any bridge. The proposal included a 23-kilometer megastructure, a mix of road, rail, and tunnel, linking Dhanushkodi in Tamil Nadu to Talaimanar in Sri Lanka. The estimated cost? A hefty $4 to $5 billion US. The vision was futuristic: dual carriageways, train tracks, underground cables for electricity and data, pipelines for fuel, and a border crossing that could change regional connectivity forever. India's Ministry of Road Transport and Highways submitted the proposal to the Asian Development Bank in 2015, which agreed to fund the project. Things seemed to finally be moving. Feasibility studies began. And during Wickremesinghe's visit to India in July 2023, both governments agreed to conduct in-depth assessments, covering technical, environmental, and economic angles. As of mid-2024, that study was reportedly in its final phase. The benefits? Nothing short of revolutionary. Transport costs to Sri Lanka could drop by up to 50%. Instead of long flights or cargo ships, people and goods could cross over by train, by truck, or even by foot. The bridge would slash travel time, enable container trucks to deliver goods efficiently, and allow tourists and pilgrims to explore both countries with ease. A train ticket might cost half of what airfare would. Pilgrimage routes, such as those tied to Rameswaram or Adams Peak, would become even more accessible. Sri Lanka could finally become a major node in Asia-Europe land travel corridors. So if the technology exists, the funding is lined up, and the benefits are clear, why hasn't construction started? That's where things get complicated. First, there's the engineering. Building across the Palk Strait isn't like building across a calm lake. The region is active, geologically and environmentally. It sees seismic activity, strong underwater currents, and a dynamic seabed. Not to mention the threat of tsunamis, shifting tectonic plates, and monsoons that batter the coasts for months each year. The sheer scale of the proposed project is immense, and the technology needed would push even the most advanced construction teams to their limits. Then there's the environmental concern. The Gulf of Mannar and the Palk Strait are ecological treasure troves. These waters host vibrant coral reefs, lush seagrass beds, and mangrove forests. They're vital breeding grounds for fish and marine life. They protect coastlines from erosion, absorb carbon, and support the livelihoods of local fishing communities. Disrupting this balance, even slightly, could have devastating effects. Previous dredging efforts have already shown what damage can be done. In 2005, the Indian government approved the Setu shipping canal project, aiming to cut shipping distances by dredging a path through the strait. But the backlash was intense. Environmentalists warned of irreversible ecological destruction. Religious groups protested, fearing damage to Rama Setu, a site they consider sacred. The Supreme Court intervened, and the project was halted after visible damage to marine ecosystems. It became a lesson in how not to handle development in sensitive areas. Built by nature, revered by tradition, and debated by politicians, it sits quietly beneath the waves, waiting for the world to decide what its future will be. And that brings the journey full circle. A story of land and sea, myth and science, ambition and hesitation. The bridge might still be missing, but the mystery, that's very much alive. If this story sparked curiosity or made you look at the map a little differently, hit that like button, subscribe for more untold histories, and tap the bell so you don't miss the next dive into the world's hidden wonders. Drop your thoughts below. Should the bridge be built or should Rama Setu remain untouched? Let's talk in the comments.